community groups advocating for change. Thank you. And powerful young people who are demanding action for this planet today and for their future. These are all major assets. Surely together we can decarbonise harder, faster, reduce emissions and turn this crisis around. Cities have a vital role in managing climate change. We can drive change through our planning controls and programs and by working with our communities and other governments. I'm very proud to be a councillor at the City of Sydney under the leadership of the Lord Mayor. We have been at the forefront of meaningful climate and environmental action for more than 2 decades. We are a council who did not ignore the worrying signs of our environment, nor the deep concerns of our residents. We didn't sit idle when it came to declaring a climate emergency, or turn away when it came time to address meaningful emissions reduction. We set ambitious, meaningful and actionable targets, and as a result, we've built a reputation for leading and influencing many other governments with our policies, advocacy and environmental partnerships. At the City of Sydney, we don't shy away from innovation to achieve our target of net zero by 2035 across the local area. Waste is the next big emissions reduction area. It was our Lord Mayor who staged a waste summit for Greater Sydney councils in 2023. A summit that addressed the big elephant in the room. There would be no New South Wales landfill sites left in 8 years. And now, terrifyingly, it's almost 6 years. And it takes 10 years to develop a new one. It was this waste summit, this mic drop moment, that has finally led to bolder action from New South Wales to mandate FOGO. The city is looking at all avenues, and I mean all avenues, to help us achieve our target of 90% diversion from landfill from our properties by June 2025. We installed food dehydrators in 3 of our biggest sites. They convert food waste into soil conditioner that we use in our parks, creating a circular solution. And early next year, which is something I'm terribly excited about, we're commencing a trial using millions of black soldier fly larvae, aka maggots, to convert the food scraps of 21,000 residents into protein-rich animal feed and fertiliser. That one, I say, is really sexy. Something that has made a big difference to the scale and impact of our work is our strategic partnerships. Our Better Buildings partnerships now involve 55% of major commercial buildings across the city and has already achieved a 95% reduction in emissions intensity and 63% reduction in water intensity. Our new performance standards for net zero energy buildings lock in energy efficiency and use of renewable energies through our planning controls. These standards were developed with strong support from the property industry, demonstrating that working in collaboration is the best way to create the changes we need for a clean energy future. This change is the first time the planning system has been used to directly reduce emissions. Transport is the second highest and fastest growing source of CO2, so you can bet we're taking that one seriously also. Cycling is a net zero emissions transport choice, and I never get sick of this growing statistic. The city has delivered 25 kilometres of safe, separated cycleway, 66 kilometres of shared paths, and 45 kilometres of other cycling infrastructure, and we haven't finished yet. Now, more than 10,000 people safely ride to work in the City of Sydney. That's the equivalent of 10 full trains and 166 full buses that we have taken off. The city's very vocal commitment to active transport and creating a city for riding and walking is not always the most popular route to take. It upsets a lot of people, but we've chosen to focus on the bigger picture. The conversion of our streetlights to energy efficient LED was the biggest carbon reduction project we've ever done. Street lighting is the largest source of electricity use for councils. However, our ability to reduce use is dependent on Ausgrid. Through our partnership with the Southern Sydney Regional Organisation of Councils, otherwise known as SSROC, we were able to encourage the joint procurement for 29 other councils to convert their streetlights to LEDs. Suddenly, at scale, this made sense and Ausgrid was on board. The project has now converted more than 210,000 streetlights across Greater Sydney, and this has resulted in savings of $94 million per year. If there's one thing to remember today, it's that none of this great work exists in a vacuum. To be successful, each and every project needs multiple inputs. What the city has learned through setting targets and going after them so ferociously is that all levels of government and the community have a responsibility to work together on this crisis. This is how we will see the greatest amount of change for the greatest amount of people. The next few years will be a race, but I am confident. I am confident because I have seen firsthand how robust climate policies can transform cities, improve our quality of life, and ensure environmental sustainability. We can also help to mitigate climate change. We can help cut carbon and cut waste through small, everyday choices. Ride a bike, use a keep cup, absolutely recycle every blister pack that you ever use. Turn your lights off, choose green power. And on a larger scale, let's all continue to advocate for, instigate good science-led policy. I urge you to think about how you can be more inclusive in your decision-making, more open and more informed. Say hello and get to know the person sitting behind you, the person you most probably don't know here today, not just the person sitting beside you who you most probably do know. Because as the city has proven, through transparency, collaboration, many small exchanges, and an enthusiasm to share information and experiences, we can go beyond targets and do so much more to drive climate action. Sydney is a place where great ideas and innovation can and will change the world. Cities want this. I believe that, and I hope you do too. Thank you for having me, and I wish you all the best for your bid. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I think there's a lot happening here in the City of Sydney, which is great to see. And having spent Monday with the bunch of Western Sydney schools and council officers there talking about heat, I know that there's a lot more that councils across Australia are dealing with. I'm just going to skip through a few different slides here, if I can, and we'll get up to the next one. But our next speaker we'll hear from is Tim Buckley, who will be speaking about his perspective on what lies ahead for Australia's net zero plans and the transformation to a clean economy. Please welcome Tim.
Good morning, thank you for having me. As the Councillor just highlighted, we are clearly, the climate science is real and the climate science is showing a massive deterioration, but I'll put that into a positive. We are in a race against the climate science to make sure we can adopt the global economy, the Australian economy, our export economy, because the technology solutions are there. And as the Lord Mayor emphasised, last year was a record year for global deployments of renewable energy. Last year was a record year when it came to deployment of electric vehicles. So the technology is there. What we need to realise is it's a race against the climate science and it's a global race to the top. And as anyone that's heard me talk, you'll know, China is absolutely dominating that race. They're winning that race. They are our #1 trade partner. We have a massive opportunity to collaborate with them, to partner with them, and to join the race and assist their race to the top, because they're out to win and they're out to actually allow us to have a livable planet. So Lisa asked me just to frame today's discussion and to highlight that there is a very strong economic case for aligning with the climate science and pushing for a 1.5 degree aligned NDC next year. It's critically important. It is critically important for our economy as well as a livable planet. It will be a massive challenge for Australia, but it will also be a massive opportunity if we seize the opportunity. I think we need to absolutely embrace the science, accelerate our effort, and know that this is a technology and investment race to the top. And so for every year that Australia stuffs around, for every year that the fossil fuel incumbents delay action in Australia, that's a year we will lose against other countries that are racing as fast as they can. So I'll maybe just disagree with one comment that the Lord Mayor made, which is the federal government's not doing enough. I'll maybe frame that and say, on the domestic economy, the federal government in the last 2 years has been doing a huge amount. We've had a number of wins, even in the last week, with passing of key legislation, but with a compounding stacking of steps in the right direction, whether it's the Future Made in Australia, the safeguard mechanism, the 82% renewables, all of those are building momentum, but that is very much at the domestic level. Where I would agree with the Lord Mayor 100% is that we are a massive fossil fuel export nation, and so therefore we have to think about our global impact and our global threat and opportunity for our, the global threat and opportunity for our economy. I'll come back to that, but maybe just because I do want to focus on the positives, we have had really good momentum. It is, Minister Bowen set a really ambitious target for 82% renewables by 2030. For a long time, in fact every single day, we read in the Murdoch media that we're not on track to deliver 82% renewables. The Clean Energy Council put out a report only 2 weeks ago saying that the third quarter level of investment and activity in Australia was a significant increase on what we'd seen in the last 18 months. And if we maintain that third quarter level, that will deliver 82% renewable. Certainly in the couple of years I've been reading the CEC reports, I've never heard them have that level of optimism. And what I'd suggest is we're about to put out a new report saying the activity in the fourth quarter is actually accelerated on the third quarter. So there is a real opportunity. And why do I mention just that goal? Electrification of everything and decarbonising electricity is the easiest and logical place to start. And Minister Bowen's shown ambition, and I think the capacity investment scheme, we're waiting for the first major generation tender to be awarded. That could be, it's either 6 or 10 gigawatts of new capacity. That's a big step change in government underwriting that will accelerate it. For probably 10 years, I've been hearing the grid can't handle high renewable energy, high variable renewable energy penetration. Now, South Australia, you're probably aware, hit 85% average variable renewable energy penetration on average last month, 85%. Don't remember reading any headlines of blackouts in South Australia. Australia, for a month, averaged 45%. Still a long way to go to 82, but we are making progress. It's worth bearing in mind the Murdoch media doesn't want to give everyone the optimism we can do it, but we are and have to do it. We did see the federal government put a little down payment, $500 million incremental funding for social housing upgrades last week. It's only a down payment. The Renew Australia for All is asking for $5 billion next week in MyEFO as another down payment on the $50 billion that we need to drive electrification of everyone. We need to do it for all Australians. We can't just leave it to the private sector and the wealthy half of Australia. We need to bring all voters along and those most affected. So it was great that the government was focusing on social housing. They now need to just do it 10 times faster, and that will buy the political support. I'll finish by emphasising the global side of Australia's economy. We are a relatively small domestic economy, but we are a huge trade-driven economy. The second biggest opportunity beyond electrification of grids in the world for decarbonisation is the global steel sector. Who's the number one supplier to the global steel sector in the world? Australia. Not a little bit. 55% of the world's iron ore exports, 55% of the world's coking coal. We are number one by a country mile in the second biggest decarbonisation opportunity in the world, and we estimate that there's 1 billion tonnes per annum of carbon dioxide reduction potential in global steel, and Australia needs to see that massive, massive opportunity. We can play absolutely at world scale and help drive decarbonisation. Fortescue yesterday just announced a partnership, another MOU. Hopefully this one will go through to delivery and actually see the dollars flow, but a critical partnership with a key Chinese steel company. We need to collaborate with our number one trade partner. We need to work with them. We need public and private capital. We need bilateral and trilateral agreements to drive that. But I'll finish by saying I had the privilege of talking with a Chinese company's advisor on Monday, and it was a aluminium company in China. They produce 10 million tonnes of aluminium a year, which is more than the entire Australian industry. And the company has an objective to reduce their emissions by 50% between 2020 and 2026. Right? 50%. Everyone says heavy industry, really hard to abate. Aluminium, hard to do. Steel, hard to do. That's an aluminium company in China, and they've done a 50% reduction by 2026. And then showed a video of a behind-the-meter 2 gigawatt solar project on tidal flats, because they obviously don't have enough land in China. So they did it on the water. 2 gigawatts, they built it in 18 months, and the cost was lower than it cost to build solar in Australia on our rooftops, where we're the lowest in the world. It's 2 gigawatts, just unbelievable, and it's built. They've already done it. They knocked down their refinery 12 years ago. They built it, they knocked it down, moved it to another province. Why? They wanted hydro, wind and solar. China's not stuffing around. They're our number one trade partner, and they're moving at 1 million miles an hour, and we can work with them, collaborate with them, and deliver that massive economic opportunity for Australia. But know that it's a global race, and if Australia doesn't stay the course, we will just undermine our economy and become a third world economy. And so that's why I get really annoyed at the LNP and their federal LNP, I should say, and their nuclear fantasies. It's all about distracting, it's all about delay, it's all about division in order to make sure Australia actually misses out on the biggest economic opportunity this century, so that their fossil fuel mates can eke out another decade of profits. So let's back in any politician that acts and accepts and acts on the climate science, and let's all lift the ambition. Thanks for coming today.
Thank you, Tim, and some great points about collaborating and learning from our neighbours there. We're about to have a panel discussion headed by Blair Palese, and I'd like to pass on some apologies. Hudson Worley from Materials and Embodied Carbon Leaders Alliance has had to send apologies due to some car trouble, but they're doing great collaborative work, and I'd like to say that Lisa and the team will be following up to make sure they get a recorded statement for the campaign from Hudson. So please welcome to the stage Blair Palese, who will introduce the panel.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming. Hope you can hear me. It's a great chance for us to pull up some of Australian companies that are in and out working on the kind of stuff Tim's been talking about right here at home, and some of them internationally. We've got a great group of people. Sasha, do you want to come up? And Georgia, Christina, and Ricardo. If you don't mind, I'm going to ask you each to do a little introduction of yourselves and tell us a little bit about your work. And then we have just some questions and thinkings and talking about for this group. And as we move forward to... Whoa. Oh, geez, thanks a lot. Sorry. I'm not going to take it personally. I think today's launch is really important, both from the point of view of where Australia goes next, what happens in a new year, in such an important election year, what we're all going to be asking the government for what we need as businesses. And I'm here to speak mostly as the Climate Capital Forum, which is a network of decarbonizing companies, investors, philanthropists, people like Tim who work on climate finance. I don't think it's rocket science to think of what we need in order to get where we want to go. As Tim said, it's a huge opportunity, and businesses are asking questions about how they can be part of that and stay the course, where the level playing field is for them, how they can internationally be part of the effort, and we have leaders here today who are going to tell you a little bit about how they're doing it and why. Christina, do you want to kick off? Just tell us a little bit about yourself. You're amazing. You've got an incredible career both across aid work and now business. Do you want to just tell us, all of you, each one after the other, who you are, your bit of your career, and why this is important to you?
Yeah, great, thanks. So I began my career in finance. I worked about 15 years with the United Nations on the front line of humanitarian emergencies, became really passionate about climate change, came back to Australia, and as you'll know, Blair, this is where I first met Blair. This was about the time that Bill McKibben first came to Australia. Many of you will know that name. And started talking about the concept of stranded assets and climate risk. And it's pretty incredible when we're in this room thinking about progress, just to take a second and acknowledge that it was only 10 years ago that these concepts in Australia, no one had heard of them. Nobody was talking about stranded assets. The linkage between finance, investment and climate was really minimal. But at that time, there was no superannuation fund in Australia that didn't invest in fossil fuels. And so I had an incredible opportunity to work with the two founders of the first superannuation fund not to invest in fossil fuels, Future Super, and a fund that's gone on to really lead the superannuation industry in terms of climate action. So it was the first carbon neutral pension fund in the world. So not only is it a fund that's Paris aligned, but it's the carbon emissions of the actual fund are fully offset through credible credits. And it is a fund that today seeks to really push the divestment agenda, also the reinvestment agenda, so the efforts to sort of use the superannuation sector, an enormous pool of capital, 3.9 trillion, to try to drive it towards climate solutions. But also we do a lot of advocacy work. So we are in an industry that really has the handbrakes put on it at the moment in terms of policy, in terms of where we need to be if we want to start transitioning those funds into climate solutions. So that's an area that I'm really passionate about as well, and that I personally work in really closely.
So I'm Sasha Tichkovsky. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Koskela and also the chair of the B Corp Climate Collective and a board member of Design Declares. So in terms of my background, Koskela is a furniture design company. We have always manufactured our products locally, work across sort of big commercial office, universities, schools and government, and realised after sort of measuring our carbon footprint for about 4 years that it was pretty obvious that you could see a nexus between our revenue growth and our Scope 3 emissions, and concluded that the only way we could really sort of break that nexus was to have a look at transitioning the business to being fully circular. So we've committed to doing that, which is not just about doing a little pilot and fluffing around the edges. It's actually about a whole-scale rethink of business that requires us to look both at our product designs but also at new business models. And that's really what we're working on today. In terms of my role within the B Corp Climate Collective, there's about 750 companies in Australia that are B Corp certified. There's a coalition of us that have banded together to try and support initiatives like this one and others to really help drive climate action, and to push for policy reform. I think most B Corps in Australia are part of the SME community, so there's a lot of focus often on the big end of town, but actually 98% of Australian companies are small businesses. They're the ones that are going to be in the firing line in terms of the impacts of climate change. They don't have the resources that bigger organisations do to actually undertake a lot of the transformation. And they also employ around 70% of Australia's workforce. So they're often sort of forgotten in the conversation. And I think that's, you know, part of what I'm interested in really pushing for.
Hi everyone, I'm Georgia Windrum. I'm the Climate Action Strategy Manager at Bank Australia. Bank Australia is a mutual bank, which means we're owned by our customers. So we talk to our customers a lot and seek to understand what's important to them and what they want the bank to be doing. One of the things that they consistently tell us is they want the bank to be taking ambitious action on climate. Which is great because it gives me a very big job to do. And it's also meant that we have set a net zero by 2035 target, which makes us the equal most ambitious bank in the world. And we've set a validated science-based target for 2030, and we were the first financial institution in Australia to do that. So what those big targets kind of look like in the day-to-day for us is focusing on our residential mortgage portfolio, and that means working with our customers to help them get off gas at home and make their homes more energy efficient. And I'm really excited that tomorrow we are announcing with the Clean Energy Finance Corporation a continuation of our partnership. We've worked together for a number of years to provide a discounted interest rate on our clean energy home loan. So it's a really significant saving for customers on their interest payments that can help them to get off gas and really drive the retrofit of Australian homes that needs to happen. So that partnership with the Clean Energy Finance Corporation is just an excellent example of where government takes bold, ambitious leadership positions. This current government with the Household Energy Upgrades Fund, there's a lot more that is needed in the space, but it's an amazing start. And working together, it's really unlocked a whole lot of collaboration and innovation within our business, and we're seeing other banks and non-bank lenders coming to the table on it now as well. So really excited for that announcement tomorrow.
Thanks, Ricardo. We've heard a little bit of your background, but maybe just how you think this kind of forward-looking approach of creating a force and a demand for more action works with what IKEA is doing both in Australia and internationally.
Thank you. So yeah, already introduced myself. I'm CFO for IKEA Australia. Just as a little bit of a background, I've been doing this financial role for almost 10 years now. Was a lot of years in Europe and recently joined Australia. And then of course we are all wondering, well, what's the CFO in this panel of people focused on sustainability and the planet? And what drove me to IKEA was actually the vision, like I told you before, to create a better everyday life for the many people. And that's what really moved me into joining the company. And the more since 10 years ago, where sustainability was not one of the biggest focus in the world, let's say like that, to see how this transformed, how this better everyday life for the many, we believe it comes through a better home that people have to live. And past years, we see that the better home, there will be no better home if there is not a planet. So better home, it's a better planet. And of course, for us, and for me particularly, because all of these investments come through my desk to approve how can we improve the business. And of course, we want to be a profitable business, but we want to secure that we have a brand that will stay for the next 80, 200 years. And of course, when I see all this focus on the sustainability, on the customers, how can we secure that they have a good life? It's through our products, but of course, it's through sustainability. And climate change is not supporting, but what I like is that at IKEA, we are stubborn optimists. We really believe we can create a better future. And we act, first of all, because we believe it's the right thing to do. Second, because our customers demand it, and our co-workers demand it as well. And thirdly, because we believe this circular economy, this use of resource in a good way, is actually the future. So yeah, that's a little bit my financial background, and why I'm here today is to show like I said before, I don't have to choose between being a profitable business or a sustainable business. We believe we have to do both. And that's what I urge to all the companies to look, because there will be no economy if we don't solve the planet.
Fantastic. And I just wanted to ask you all, I guess in the sense of Australia in particular, we do lag behind in a lot of ways. Europe has been a real leader. We've seen advances and innovations happening post the IRA in the US. Who knows where that will go with the next presidency. But how important are people, organizations, groups of people like Andrew's organization, like B Corp, that help those like-minded companies that want to take action do that? And how important is the relationship between those groups and talking to the government about what you need? Is that a real important role that associations like Andrew's and others play to help you find like-minded companies to be able to kind of go out and lead on climate and sustainability? Maybe you'd like to talk about Bank Australia, because you've been such a leader in the banking space.
Yeah, of course, we're also a certified B Corp, and it's absolutely important. We're a small bank. We are really putting ourselves out there, trying to be as ambitious as possible, and it's hard to do that on your own. You absolutely need a community of other businesses around you, and in addition to that, I think it was Andrew who said, policy certainty drives business confidence. Bank Australia has been doing work in this space for decades. It's been important to us. It's part of the DNA of being a mutual organisation. And I still wouldn't underestimate the role of what the federal government is doing in the decisions that we make and our level of confidence in how fast we are going. So that interplay, I suppose, between that public policy and then having a community of progressive business all pulling in the same direction is so important. It's great to be a first mover, but you don't want to be out there alone with no one following you. Yeah.
Christina, you've been out there really far out front. How important is it for you as a business and a real leader?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, currently we have around 15 billion in assets under management, and it's great if we can do good work with that money, but that big pool is 3.9 trillion, and we simply have to start moving that in Australia if we're going to protect people's retirement savings, and at the moment I would say on the large they're at risk, and secondly, if we're actually going to use this money, and we would only require a really small percentage of it, I think it's something like 5% to actually transition the whole economy. And so getting that policy setting right is absolutely key. And personally, I think it requires a bit of both. I think that as a sole actor who is a really progressive organisation, we can push a lot harder in some areas and pull some levers harder than other funds may be willing to. But there's nothing like the power of, a whole industry coming together and asking for change to actually get that change. So personally, I think there's opportunities at times to go it alone, but absolutely needing to pull together as well with other super funds that want to see this change.
Sasha, tell us about the climate group within B Corp. Is that a place where people exchange ideas, innovations, challenges? Is that really important to them in terms of their membership as a B Corp? Is that where they kind of come together to ask those kind of questions?
Yeah, so some of it's about driving change within the B Corp community and opening up those toolkits and things to other organisations as well. So some of it's sort of education. We're running a green energy program that'll kick off next year. But there's also different B Corps that have been involved in kind of pushing for climate action. So we ran a campaign called Pass the Bill, Not the Buck a while ago, which was quite successful in terms of raising awareness. I think in terms of a collective message, it's just so critical now. So there's been so many, in some ways I sort of almost wonder if the job of the fossil fuel industry is made so much easier when everyone goes off and does their own separate messaging. And so I feel very strongly that if we could come together as a collective and have one unified message, that it would just be so powerful. And I've quite often been in forums with members of the federal government who said, oh, we're just not hearing enough from businesses that they want to see this. And the fossil fuel lobby is so much louder that I feel as though we need to almost adopt their tactics and be more bold and get out there and do more and actually really advocate for change.
Absolutely. And Ricardo, IKEA has done that for many years around the world in pushing for, circular economy, recycling of products, all those things that many companies have kind of held back. Do you find in Australia you have enough like-minded companies, that you share the same kind of forward thinking, or is it more of a challenge here than overseas?
Well, we see ourselves as one of the companies in the forefront because we believe really in the sustainability and the climate action. Of course, there are other companies doing great job, but of course, we have to look internally and we try to do whatever we can to do our part. So we are big focus on electrification. We have invested in our units to be producing energy via PV panels. We are investing in solar parks. We have a big stake now in the Victoria investment in wind farm. So we are trying to do on our side, but we cannot do that alone. And alone we will not change the world. So we really believe that in forums like this with organizations that we need that support. And connecting to what Tim said before, we have at IKEA, globally, we want to reach 100% of electric deliveries via truck to our customers. In Australia, we are right now reaching around 60%. And we have seen that countries like China, the moment we put this challenge, they changed policies, and Shanghai was the first city to reach 100% of electric deliveries in the city. So we know there is a strong focus from governments, and we know it can be done with the support from the governments and the policies together with the companies. So yeah, we, as all other retailers and other companies, we can do a lot, but of course we cannot do it alone. We need support. So this is actually what we need and what we're looking for.
Yeah, I think, Lisa, we look to you for ways to be, I think, giving us all a chance to be vocal with help, because it is hard for all of us as individuals. I work at Ethinvest, small financial services company. We're a B Corp, but we don't have staff to do government liaising. So when it comes to setting NDCs and where we're going with COP31, I think all of this room, we'd say, call on us and shepherd us to point us in the right direction to talk to government so they hear those voices. And more, I think we have a lot. We're going up against a pushback from fossil fuel companies and others who will try to slow us down. So it's our job to keep the pressure on. Would you like us to go to some Q&A in the room for a minute and see if people have, it's a great panel and a chance for you to fire away questions and maybe ask how you can stay involved, be involved with some of these very forward-thinking companies. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks for the slides and for your work in your own organisations as well as this campaign. It's really great to see some people talk about Mission2025 instead of Project 2025. So that's really great. My name's Ray, so I'm the founder of the Youth Climate Policy Centre. We're a think tank that works with youth-run climate-focused organisations to help them develop policy asks and connect them to decision makers. There's a lot of great organising that goes on, particularly because young people are the ones who are most affected by climate change, but they're also the ones who contribute to it. So my question to the panel is, what are you doing in your organisations as well as through your strategies and campaigns to involve young people in those processes?
That's a great question. If you couldn't hear in the back, how are our panelists involving young people, whether as customers or future customers, in the issue and getting them involved? And yeah. Chris, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, I would say our whole organisation is driven by young people. The staff are young people, but the customers primarily are young people. I would say we're the sort of fastest growing super fund in Australia of young people. And, it's about listening and following the lead of what they're demanding, really. I think something that's really exciting for us is that the customer base that we have is extremely active in telling us what they do want to be invested in and what they don't want to be invested in. We also have found really great opportunities to engage our members in what we're doing, so actually taking them out to some of the solar farms that we're investing in or other projects as well. And I think that kind of connection, and I think what we've realised is that our customers are often real leaders in their communities, and so being able to activate them and support them and give them the tools to go out and spread the message of divesting from fossil fuels and the power of you as a consumer and what you can do in terms of finance has been yeah, really, really critical.
Quite similar, actually, to Future Super. We are often engaging closely with our customers, and some of our most passionate customers are young people. They bank with Bank Australia because they understand that where they put their money matters. And so being able to really highlight and showcase the leaders in our customer community is important to us. I would also say that it's, you know, banking is an interesting industry for young people, and particularly with home ownership, it's something that we're very conscious of in responding to the expectations that our members have about what we are doing on climate action, but balancing that with what is fair and just. And the comment was made earlier, I think by Tim, we can't be designing policy just for the wealthy half of Australia. And the same goes for talking about household electrification is great if you can afford a home and if you can afford to do that work within your home. So for us, we're looking at ways that we can advocate for the circumstances that a lot of young people are in, which is they're most likely to be renters. And so we're partnering with university think tanks and community advocacy groups around the split incentive issue between landlords and renters on home decarbonisation. So I think it's balancing, you know, showcasing the leadership that young people are already showing in this space with practical action about what the, you know, financial circumstances that most young people are in and how we can help with that as a bank.
No, I think at IKEA, of course, when we think about a better home, you think about young families, right? When they start their new house, when they start new family, it's when they actually probably need IKEA the most to support them. And when we say we are for the many, it means we want to reach them with affordable products, sustainable products, good quality, good function, beautiful products. And of course, the way we interact with the younger people is we know, just like you said, that they have contributed the least, but they will probably be the ones that are suffering. So we see a big focus from this age group on the sustainability topics, more than perhaps other groups. And what we try to is via our sustainable products that can allow them to save energy, save water, help with reducing food waste. We try to connect with them and we try to support and show how IKEA can support a better world and a better planet.
Hi, my name's Kathy Bryler. I'm a councillor with Lane Cove Council, but I'm also an architect. So my question's probably going to start with Sasha. We know that there is a very large carbon footprint that is created by the building industry. It's one of the challenges that we don't all have all the answers for. It was great to hear about the steel, though. That is definitely going to help in a large area. My question's more about waste. I understand that companies like IKEA and also Koskela, who I have done work with, are addressing their carbon mission by producing really carbon sensitive products, which is great, and conscious of what they're producing and how they're producing it and how they're marketing it. But the question still is, especially in the fit out industry for buildings like this, what happens with the high turnover and also probably with the youth? I'm guilty myself of having bought a lot of IKEA when I was young and then putting it in the bin. What are we doing to address the waste issue with building industry fit out products and furniture?
Yeah, it's a really big issue. So there's been a couple of studies that have been done that show that over a life cycle of a building, if you refit it every 15 years, so over a 60-year life cycle, the embodied carbon in each of those fit-outs, when you add them up, is actually higher than the embodied carbon in the building itself. And of that, more than 50% is actually in the furniture. So it's quite a big issue. We're working on a number of different initiatives to try and move the industry forward. So including things like subscription models for furniture. So rather than companies actually owning furniture that they do not value because they leave it behind at the end of their tenancy, just changing that whole sort of equation. But that's quite a big system shift in thinking that involves a whole number of different players, from how do you structure a lease incentive to, you know, what happens at end of life. And I think we're starting to get a bit closer to really thinking about what a circular fit out could look like. So how do you actually change the design industry, which is often where it starts. So how do we get them to rethink what they specify and how fit outs are designed so that they can actually be repairable, and they can be pulled apart and, you know, transitioned into a new fit out rather than just shoved in the bin. So it's a very big issue.
Thank you. Yeah, so at IKEA, what we look into is, of course, one can say we are a company that sells a lot of products and creates a lot of waste. How can we be contributing and not making it worse? In reality, our business model has been shifting. So now today we look at services. We are actually looking globally at furniture as a service. We have buyback, so we started the buying back the products, pre-loved IKEA products, and then resell them to a new customer, prolonging the life of the product and also allowing people to save money. We offer repair parts, spare parts for customers for free. So we try to change our business model into, it's not about just throwing away and buying a new one, but actually how can I prolong the life of the products? How can they, if it's not good for me, it will be good for someone else. If we go today at second-hand markets, we see how quick and how many IKEA products there are and the big market that's behind that. So it's huge. And on top of that, of course, the whole IKEA industry has been focused on recycling. So we use more and more recycled products. We use recycled plastic found in the oceans, recycled textiles. How do we build products with recycled materials to use as least raw material as possible? And how to make them to be also recyclable. After we have big success stories worldwide about using mattresses, which is a problem actually in the world because it's hard to recycle, but how do we use them? How do we have companies to create, to recycle, tear them apart and use them again to build new mattresses that we sell then at IKEA? So I think there's a lot of amazing stories, and I do believe we are just at the beginning. There's so much more we can do as a business. And that's how we contribute.
And then we might check if there's anyone online that had a question too. Sorry, onliners.
Hi, thanks everybody. I work in the communication space, and I was thinking about that idea of that policy certainty drives growth. In terms of, as Tim said, there's a whole media machine that tries to suppress these messages. Are there places that you found that circumvent that traditional media, as the reality is that traditional media is probably sunsetting? Have you found platforms and channels to leverage that reach out to other businesses to make it okay? Like, hey, I'm a business, I'm successful, how do you guys address that? And then I think you talked about the B Corp collective. How does that work?
Yeah, and great question. And add on, if you would, how do you reach out to your consumers or your potential consumers in a world where the mainstream media in this country, owned by Murdoch, isn't interested in telling your good news stories? How do you think about that? And do you have advice, I guess, and ideas for all of us to what we can do in order to get that message across?
Yeah, I mean, so our company predominantly is made up of younger customers, but social media in that regard is really helpful for us because I think young people, a cohort of young people, are very sceptical of traditional media. I think the challenge is, obviously, we've seen in the US election, is that skepticism can then be diverted into different paths. But it's relatively easy for us to capture young people online who have an interest in this. And then I think it's the power of EDMs, direct email communications, to start telling that story in a more built-out narrative. And then really educating people around, our key message, which is one of fossil fuel divestment. And then, what we found is that, young people are then able to divert that through their networks and communicate and, through social media, through conversation. So I think there is an opportunity. And I think the challenge for us is is pulling that skepticism towards science and reality, and not letting it divert down different paths.
Yeah, I definitely agree in terms of sort of customer interactions, EDMs and social media. So actually owning your own kind of like customer relations is really important. And then I think the other thing is around sort of creating collectives and opportunities for people to actually come together to solve problems collectively. And to work on initiatives collectively. So once those relationships start to get built, it sort of almost amplifies, and I think that's one way. You could sort of see it in the community-backed independence campaigns that all started off as, you know, little groups of interested people, and then they grew into big collectives where people were all unified under one goal. And I think those opportunities for actual face-to-face contact build relationships unlike any other kind of form of social media. And so if there are ways that you can engineer that. And then the other thing that we use quite successfully, I think, in the Pass the Bill, Not the Buck campaign is actually using physical media. So, you know, things like billboards and opportunities like that can really help to drive messaging.
Maybe just a slightly different reflection on this. I think in rooms like this, we can talk about net zero by 2035, we can talk about NDCs. That doesn't mean anything to people outside this room. Well, there are some people that it means something to, but something that I'm very conscious of at Bank Australia is being practical for people in their day-to-day life. And even when we talk about the economic opportunities and the race Australia is in and China's winning the race, there's a clear message that we can add to that about if we succeed, you can live in a home that's cheaper to run, that's not freezing cold in winter and boiling hot in summer. You can live in a city where it's safe to ride a bike. Just things that people actually have a stake in. I think we are often speaking in the abstract about climate action that we all understand, and there are a lot of people who do understand and get it, but there's a cost of living crisis, there's a housing crisis, it's just the perma-crisis of everything, and bringing the message to something simple that is a clear, positive vision for a happier, better life, I think is really important. And maybe it sounds a little bit trite, but I do think it gets lost a little bit in these kind of conversations, that this needs to be made real and people need to see what's in it for them.
We do have one more question from Robin from UN Global Compact Online, and then we might wrap with the final message to policymakers. Thanks, guys.
Good morning, everyone. Well, thank you so much for the panel. Thank you for everything you've said. You've talked about some great examples of collaboration so far between private and public sector, governments, etc. What partnerships still need to happen, as in partnerships that don't yet exist, that will really accelerate these changes?
Good question. From the Climate Capital Forum point of view, that trend toward private and public partnerships is still slow in Australia. I feel like other countries have leapt ahead to creative finance structures that have helped speed up money into solutions that are not just 100% market driven. And we could do a lot more. It's patient capital kind of outcome, but I think investors are interested in it. I think future super and super companies generally are starting to kind of look to a percentage that could be invested in that. So that'd be my one thing, but I'd be curious to hear what all of you think.
Yeah, I completely agree with that from the investment side. I would also say potentially beyond what new partnerships, I think it's also like how do we, across partnerships, start to prioritise our messages. So I think if I look at the last term of government where it was like everyone was descending because it was like, now's the moment. And it was like, were we asking for the most prioritised things and speaking unitedly? And I think that's probably the next task if we get another favourable government for the next few years. I think the question is, how do we sort of come together across partnership groups and make certain that we are asking for the most important things and consolidating our voice behind them?
Yeah, I'd agree with that completely.
I'd also say that big high-level partnerships like the Household Energy Upgrades Fund, which I mentioned earlier. You know, that's an excellent big partnership between the government and the private sector. But from something like that, there's so many more partnerships that flow, and you know, the mention of small business as well. There's so many opportunities that come from that. We've partnered with the tech space. We're looking at trades, suppliers, installers of products for homes. That then necessitates a whole behaviour change piece and comms campaign. Like, there are many, many opportunities for innovation and business opportunities essentially that come from those high-level news headlines of two big entities coming together.
Yeah, from an IKEA perspective, and look at our business model, of course, what is the kind of support we need in partnerships? How we can contribute by electrification is by using solar panels to reduce the usage of electricity that's not renewable. So, of course, a lot of support from policymakers on how to promote and contribute with higher solar usage. How can we get it to cheaper prices? How can we contribute, be able to easily sell also the energy that we produce on our stores? And also the other big part that we produce on CO2 is on our deliveries. So we deliver a lot of products all around the country, and this generates a lot of CO2. Like I said, 60% close to that is already done in electric vehicles, but not 100%. And what we need to reach there? We have countries like in Europe where every fuel station not just have fuel, but also have 2-3 fast chargers. In Australia, we don't are there. So how can we contribute to secure the electric vehicle distribution if then we don't have the infrastructure? So the partnership for us as a big company, we try to do our best. We try to do everything we can within our reach, but there is a cap, there is a limitation to which we cannot do more, and then we need support from policies, new rules, infrastructures, to allow us to reach even greater sustainability goals.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, and thanks to everyone on the panel and for your questions. Can we give them a big round of applause? Thanks. Turning over to Lisa, I think, to wrap us up for today. And if you want to be involved in Better Futures and where it's headed, see Lisa and the team after, because there's a lot of work ahead. Thanks.
And a huge round of applause for Blair. Thank you. And I will bring in Lee, who's a professional, to guide us through.
Well, of course, we've got some calls to action. I'm just here to really present to you some of the things that obviously come from Better Futures Australia and Lisa. It's been great today to hear so many people from different sectors and different parts of the sustainable economy picture, as well as the future of what it means to be sustainable in every single way, not just environmental but social. So I think at the moment we want to talk about what's next. The February 10 deadline for those NDCs is coming up very quickly. There will also be an MI2025 event. Do you want to say something about that, Lisa?
Yeah, so thanks everyone for coming along today. It is always with our very small but awesome team a matter of building the plane as we fly it. So with Mission 2025, we saw a real opportunity and the February 10 deadline and a federal election to amplify all of the voices. So I'd love a commitment from all of you here today to go away and recruit 3 peers in your sector to also share a message for this campaign. So we'll be following up with a email and probably chasing you on social media and whatever other channels to send in your recorded message to all politicians, all sides of politics, that Australia needs an ambitious, science-aligned national climate plan, and we need to stay the course. We've heard from the amazing panelists today, and Tim with his economic analysis. This is what we all need, this is what we all want, and Councillor Worley also showed that, you know, cities need this, we all need this if we're going to have an economy, have resilient communities in the future. So please do keep an eye out, or hopefully one of our awesome team can capture you today with a statement, and we'll be amplifying your voices and hopefully reaching some other small businesses, some other corporates, banks, investors, and really making them aware that, yes, this is what we want and we can work together. We've got the government's back, we've got each other's backs, and we can go further, faster together. So please do keep an eye out for that. And then, yes, I'll ask Harry from Greenhouse to come up, and we will also be building a plane as we fly it to host, and we're seeking partners. We have no money to fund any of this, so if anybody, wants to support, please do reach out. We'll be hosting a big public event, is our aim, at the March Climate Action Week Sydney, to really bring together more voices across the economy and society and all levels of government to show that, yes, we've got this and we need to keep on track. So Harry, I'll get you to share a bit about Climate Action Week, second year. It's going to be super exciting. Thanks, Harry.
Thank you so much, Lisa and Lee, and thank you for choosing Greenhouse for this amazing event. There's so many familiar faces in the audience who have been at Greenhouse's events over the last 12 months and have contributed to Sydney Climate Action Week. There are 700 members in this space working on climate tech and nature solutions, from technology companies to not-for-profits to government agencies and professional services firms and investment. So there's a space here that you're all welcome in, and we host events like this quite frequently to bring people together. Last November, Greenhouse pitched to the City of Sydney that just like Singapore, London and New York, Sydney should host a Climate Action Week. Not just for a platform to bring people together, but for a chance to showcase what capabilities Sydney has to lead climate change and the energy transition. 4 universities in the top 100 globally, the focal point of Australia's climate tech community, the hub of investment in this country and industry leadership. Why aren't we doing more as a city, and why can't we be a beacon for global climate action in line with the messages that Tim had about the economic opportunity of green iron and other sectors? Next March, there'll be another wave of events across Sydney Climate Action Week that anybody can contribute to. You can all host your own events, you can all pitch ideas or themes that others can collaborate on. So please engage with the Sydney Climate Action Week website. And also next year, Greenhouse will be dedicating this hub and 20 collaboration spaces, meeting rooms and workshop rooms, to a series of events focused on innovation and investment, on how we can take climate tech innovation and how we can scale that with the collaboration of corporates and investment. So if you're interested in that topic specifically, we'd love to hear from you. Okay, thank you so much for coming today.
And just to remind you not to run, you're here physically in the room, still coffee and some food, and of course you can network and record your statement today if you're worried about forgetting it and not wanting to do anything in the summer heat that will be here. And if you're online, thank you so much for joining us virtually, and I hope you'll also do some virtual networking with people you've seen online and in the room. Thanks so much, everyone.
And just a final thank you to the amazing Lee Constable. Isn't she awesome? If anyone needs an MC or professional science communicator, climate communicator, she should go to. Yeah, thanks.